We're approaching 11 a.m. Let's just wait 2 or 3 minutes for more people to join. Having a great morning. I appreciate you all taking the time to join the second tech session of DSPC in this fall semester. My name is Min Tao. I am currently a second-year master's student in computational social science, and I will be the host for today's tech session in A/B testing. So in this section, it probably lasts 30 minutes or so. We're about to discuss the standard procedures in A/B testing, some of the common issues data science may care at this current time in 2022. Before getting to the session, I'd like to briefly talk about who we are and what we do. So we are a data science professional club. We have a we regularly host tech sessions and speaker and panel events throughout the fall semester. We also have latest news in tech sent out via our email list. So please make sure to subscribe to our email list and check out our homepage. So in today's section, I plan to specifically talk about some of the issues related to like insufficient statistical power, and then why we cannot use t-test in all the scenarios, even though t-test is usually considered to be the robust case. And also Simpson paradox, network effects, which is one of the usual question in interviews, and also a very important topics, research topics in the actual practice. So the purpose today is to give you all a general understanding of A/B testing if you haven't get started, or if you already get started, which is really good. I also hope to share with you my personal experience just to give you, just to set the ball rolling. There will be no in-depth or very nitty-gritty mathematic details. I will focus more on the intuition behind. And again, this is not a lecture like tech session. I really welcome and appreciate you all to chime in anytime to share your thoughts. And yeah, so without further ado, let's just dive in. I personally will divide the task you guys will take charge of in A/B test projects into 3 phases. The first one is before the launch of the experiment. So in usual cases, we want to spend enough time thinking through the products. And in this section, what I mean by that is read through the documents, sometimes documents drafted by product managers, which usually talks about what are the product features they want to test it in the context of the products. And then we need to come up with specific key metrics, North Star metrics, guardrail metrics, adoptions to answer some of the product questions listed out in documents, because we are the person who know the data and know the statistics, know what kind of metrics is appropriate for testing, and then get back to PM, and then we kind of work together to lay out a metric we would like to monitor in the A/B testing. And then we also need to talk with PM about the minimal detectable effect we would like to set. In other words, we want to understand how confident we are, how confident the product managers are regarding the features they want to test. If they're very confident, that we can probably set a high minimal detectable effect. And if they're not very confident for the outcome, then we probably need to be more sensitive in very minor lift in our key metric. And in the meantime, the second question we want to ask is how long product managers can wait. If they can wait like for 2 months, then everything is not a big deal. We can design a very sensitive experiments with high statistical power if we have enough traffics. But if they want to get the results, which is the usual case in 2 weeks or so, we probably need to there will be a couple of back and forth negotiations once we calculate the minimal required sample size. And then also check the AA variance. It's worth noting that at this current time, since we have the experiment platforms on most tech companies, so we don't need to calculate certain the statistical significance p-values for some invariant metrics manually. Those are, I would say, in most cases embedded in the experiment platforms at tech companies. The second phase, which is during the A/B experiment, I think as a data scientist, we need to check the invariant metric and make sure the experiment is well set up. In other words, the traffic is flowing in as expected. And we also want to monitor the key evaluation metric to make sure, say, we don't want the guardrail metric to drop significantly or extensively. And that's the metric we would like to monitor. So that we can stop the experiment or discuss with PM to modify our proposal at the very first time when we identify something weird. And the third phase is something related to after the experiment, after the end of the experiment, like post-experiment analysis. Read the p-values, magnitudes of difference, minimal detected effect correspondingly. So those are the normal stuff. What I would like to emphasize is that sometimes we would always want to dive deeper when we notice something surprise us. I often one of the questions I had in mind is that how deep should we dive into? So we all know when we identify something that surprises us, we want to do segmentation analysis, break down the target users by some key dimensions, but how far should we go? One answer that I received from a senior data scientist is that just never stop never stop until your question got answered. So if you identify something really gonna surprise us and affect your product recommendation, then definitely you should keep digging in. because what we want to get back to PM is a product recommendation and a logical conclusion and a logical layout of the story, what's happening on the users, what users are thinking of our products. So that's I think that's part of the reason we data scientists are called scientists. So we want to make sure we deliver a logical and self-contained arguments in a report, rather than just like, hey, this is everything looks good, we can launch it. We need to formalize them in a report. So that's kind of my personal take on the standardized versus SOP if at this current time. I would like to also illustrate using an example. So let's say we are data scientists at TikTok ads, and at this current time, our product manager noticed that a lot of videos just failed to pass the audit because they didn't add the music designated by advertisers. So usual case, advertiser will say Nike will say, I want the creators to use the music that kind of fits my brand, or the music that I think is appropriate. So advertiser will always impose such restrictions when creators filming the videos and creating their submissions. But sometimes creators forgot to do that, and PM proposed to add a toast notification as demonstrated on the right hand side to remind creators to do so. So if that is the case, if we are asked to design an experiment to answer the research question if we should really go ahead and launch this notification feature, what I would do is to first think through the products, what the questions PM aim to answer is that whether adding this toast notification can actually increase our key metric. And the key metric corresponding to the key question, which is increasing, which is helping creators to get through the audit. So the key metric here might be something like the audit rate for each video, or the average number of videos that pass the audit per creators. And we also want to think about the guardrail metrics, because adding toast notification like that would definitely harm user experience when they create videos, right? So we probably want to also measure the complete rate of creator submitting a video. So those are the metrics we want to track, and we also want to discuss with the PM how much love they're confident with, like the qualified videos that pass the audit, something like that. And when we launch the experiment, we want to make sure that there's actually if we say we want to use 5% of traffic to launch to test this feature, we want to make sure we're actually having 2.5% in the control group, 2.5 in the experiment group. Everything looks good, and then there's no significant drop, like say on the first day or second day in the very first beginning of our experiment on our guardrail metrics. And then after when the experiment ends, we want to evaluate whether the difference between the control group and the experiment group is actually significant on our key metric, and there's no significant drop on our guardrail matrix, which is the complete rate, and then write a report and deliver it to PM. That would be my understanding at this current time. I would like to just quickly pause a second before getting into the next part. So feel free to just send questions via chat or unmute yourself if you have anything in your mind. All right. The second topics I want to talk about is insufficient statistical power. So the first question we want to discuss might be, what is insufficient statistical power? So again, using the example that we talked about just before, to say that we are with data scientists working on TikTok, and to test the effect of adding this toast notification, message notification. And then we did notice the key metric increase, but the lift, the upward lift is not statistically significant. And we did all sorts of sanity checks. We couldn't find a reason. And PM is very confident about the change. They think it's definitely going to increase our key metric, our qualified video rate, something like that. But it's just no significant, the result is not significant. So my take on the reason causing that would be insufficient statistical power. In other words, if we set the minimal detectable effect too high at the very first beginning, say 10%, and we only allocate that many traffic, that amount of traffic to detect at least 10% uplift on our key metric to this experiment, and then let's say the actual lift is 2% or 3%, then the result would not be statistically significant because we don't have that much statistical power. We don't have that many samples to detect the effect. And if that is the case, say that I just blindly follow the procedure, I will probably suggest PM to not launch this product feature. And this will be a false negative case since since the actual strategy of using a toast message can actually increase our key metric. But then I was like misled by the result of this A/B experiment to believe the result is not statistically significant. But that could be the reason of insufficient statistical power. So I missed this opportunity to actually drive up our key metric. This is what I would call insufficient statistical power. And this is usually the case in tech companies. I know there will be articles out there saying we have like billions of traffic is usually not the case. But I would argue that most of the cases we are working on just a specific product feature. And the amount of users exposed to that product feature could be 1,000 times smaller than, say, the monthly active user on Facebook or TikTok. So like, if I remember correctly, the amount of traffic like actually use this TikTok creating page, access to creating page, essentially they're called creators on TikTok. It's just like less than 1 million or so, or 100,000, something like that. So it's not a large number compared to user-side traffic experiment. So that could be a problem we want to keep us in mind. So how to deal with insufficient statistical power? The short answer is to reduce variance. There will be tons of advanced techniques out there to reduce variance. I'm not going into details today, but I definitely encourage you to check out by Googling or searching articles on Medium. There's a lot of good resources out there. But I would just like to share with you the structure that I currently have after reading some of the articles. So the first categories of techniques to reduce variance of our key metric so that we have higher statistical power is like obviously increase sample size. This is always the most straightforward and effective way, I would say, to increase statistical power, but it has also high cost, right? Sometimes we don't have, the reason is for us to have insufficient statistical power, it's just that we don't have enough samples. And then the second approach related to sampling is to perform stratification sampling. This is also considered an effective way to to reduce the variance. And the second type of ways are experiment design through randomized on a more granular units. This is elaborated in the Trustworthy Online Control Experiment book, which means if eligible, if we can actually do the experiment on page view units, session units, rather than on user units, and the key metric, the key question we aim to answer can also be evaluated using a page view level matrix, then we can obtain a lower variance by looking at page view matrix because we have more samples. And also do a paired experiment, something like we have, like, say we have 100 A/B tests running at the same time. What we can do is to group the control group of this 100 experiments as one very large control pool, and then do the statistical inference based on that. I've never seen that in the tech industry, in industry, but this is a technique suggested by Trustworthy Online Control Experiment, which is also a famous book written by data scientists at LinkedIn and Microsoft. The third way, I would say is very popular, it's definitely used a lot in the industry, is to use pre-treatment data to construct a new proxy, and then such as Cupid, something like that. And then use the newly constructed Y to replace our current target variable. This will give us a consistent statistical inference, but at a lower volatility. And the third technique is related to matrix design. Obviously, we can use less volatile matrix. So for instance, if we want to use, like, say, average number of sessions, average number of video views, we could probably use some percentage matrix, like percentage user who do this and do that. Sometimes we'll have lower variance for those proportional matrix. And another thing we can do is to remove outliers, so that we can, like, get rid of the long tails. The second topic related to the common issues is pitfalls in t-tests. So why should we care? T-test is very robust. Without, I don't have to spend a huge amount of time discussing that. It's just that there are a lot of cases, where t-tests cannot do well. The first case is that we have very skewed distribution, and the distribution is hardly normal. And in that case, we probably don't want to use t-test. And the second case is that if we want to test a click-through rate, which is defined as the number of click actions divided by the total number of views. In other words, when we want to track page view level metrics rather than user level metrics, we don't have IID assumptions, because in that case, the clicks I made today is definitely going to correlate with the clicks I made tomorrow. So in that case, we'll probably need to use some other testing methods to do that. I just want to give you a general understanding, an overview of the statistical methods that could potentially works in different scenarios, and you could definitely check out later for more details regarding these issues. So first, user average metrics. So something like average number of likes per user, average number of video views per user. If we want to test these metrics in A/B tests, obviously t-test, well, this is the case that t-test works. But I would like to make a point here that there are some articles out there suggesting that we should always use Wilk's t-test rather than just student t-test, because almost all the cases won't have homogeneous variance. So it would be better for us to just use Wilk t-test without pulling all the data and calculate the variance to check if the population variance is the same between the two groups. It's usually very costly, and often the result is that the variance are just not the same between the two groups. And then if the distribution is very skewed, then we probably need to opt for the Mann-Whitney U-test, the unparametric test. And I remember that VK Technology wrote an article on Medium, kind of just simulate all sorts of testing methods, such as parametric test, t-test, and Mann-Whitney U-test, and then bootstrapping methods. The conclusion is that Mann-Whitney U-test, even though it's an unparametric test, the power is not that low. It's actually doing good. It's actually doing fine. So the point I want to make here is that when we identify some very skewed matrix, like multimodal distribution, let's just use Mann-Whitney U-test. It's doing great. And the second type of matrix is user level conversion matrix, say retention. In other words, the granularity here is user rather than a specific session or a specific user action. And in this case, we have binomial proportion distribution, and we can use proportional z-tests here. The third type of matrix, I would say, is usually discussed in many articles, in practice, and also interview questions as a tricky one to kind of just bait you to make mistakes, is that page-view level conversion matrix. The reason for that is CTR can be correlated. As I discussed before, the session I made today is definitely going to correlate with the session I made tomorrow. So we want to use delta methods, and we want to use delta method to kind of transform the correlated click-through rate matrix to an IID metric, and then use t-test on the transformed IID metric. I'm not going into the details here, but it's really not that complicated. So don't be retained. And for percentile matrix, sometimes we want to look at, like, say, 99 percentile latency if we want to do some backend engineering testing. And it's also worth noting that the 99th percentile latency matrix is also correlated. It's like, it's not at the user granularity, it's at session granularity. So we want to do some like manipulations prior to performing z-test or t-test, this normality-based test. And lastly, some matrix is not recommended. It's going to be very complicated if we want to look at the total GMV, total video views. The only way is to use simulation, but it's very complicated. It's not as straightforward. So most of the cases, what I would tell the PM is that we don't recommend using total GMV. If we really want to track total GMV, we could certainly do that, but I'm just not going to report the p-values. But I can report, like, say, the average GMV, the average video views per user using t-test, Wilk's t-test, or Mann-Whitney t-test to answer your questions whether the difference is significant or not. And then I'm going to report what's the magnitude, what is the absolute level of the total GMV between the two groups, the difference in total GMV between the two groups. Any questions we want to discuss here before getting to the Simpson paradox? Okay. We don't have a lot of time here. So Simpson paradox, So I believe most of you guys are very familiar with Simpson paradox, so I'm not going to go through the details here. But what I'd like to emphasize here is that how it's the connection between Simpson paradox and A/B testing. Because what I found is that most of the articles just say it's kind of mistakes you should avoid when you say like people usually use like the Berkeley admission case, but I don't think that's very straightforward, and I don't think that is very easy to understand because it's not related to A/B tests. So often so here I gave an example in A/B test scenarios, and sometimes for these very complex phenomena, we probably want to think of the extreme case first. So the point I want to make here is that so you can try manipulate, like you can say you will have a very drastic different sampling composition, and then you will have a selection matrix for this user group. So in the example I gave here, we have experiment group and we have the control group. And for some of the reason, then there's something wrong, say there's something wrong with our traffic diversion algorithm. And then we have all the users in our experiment group are male users, and all the users in our control group are female users. And if the product we're working on is, say, a makeup products, in our common sense, the conversion rate for female is going to be higher than male users. In that case, even though the treatment or the product feature we're testing is indeed effective, as you can see, we have 11% for the experiment group, 10% for the control group. For male users, 91% versus 90% for female users, which means we're actually having an uplift here. But if we just look at the overall conversion, then definitely experiment is going to be much slower than a control group. So this is because we have drastically different sample composition. We have very like all the users in our experiment group are male, and the male users have a significant lower conversion than female users. That create a difference. So one way to do that is check the homogeneous composition for this for control group experiment group, and make sure the time frame we're focusing on is the same at experiment period. So we don't have like so what we're trying to do is to make sure the traffic composition is the same for experiment group and the control. In that case, we'll probably safe. And I would say in most of the cases, Simpson paradox is not a concern, because the traffic diversion algorithm, the traffic diversion services at tech companies very like professional at this current time. They don't make such mistakes. And lastly, network effects. So yeah, this is a great topic. I'm very interested in this topic, but since we don't have a lot of time, I would like to just give you a general understanding of what's going on here. So often the case, like say, there are two categories of network effects. The first one is that for those social media products or like tools such as Google Docs, chances are that treatment can have a positive effect on the control group. If the treatment on the control, if the, like say, the new strategy or the new product feature on the treatment group is very successful, like say on Facebook, and then all the users within the treatment group use extensively more than people in the control group, then it is very possible that their connections will also use Facebook a lot, because their friends use Facebook a lot. So in that case, the difference is going to be, we'll tend to underestimate the difference. And then the second case will be treatment will have a negative impact on the control group. Like say, if the treatment users use Uber a lot, and if the supply is relatively fixed, then users in the control group will have, like, it will be more difficult for user in the control group to, get a ride. So the key idea to solve network effects is clustering. And there are a lot of very great articles out there on Medium. So published by the data science team at Lyft and the data science team at Airbnb and Facebook. But the key idea is just to like use clusters. Like the clusters, they cluster users into geographic units, and they sometimes cluster users into time units. And sometimes they kind of combine these two into geographic and time units. So basically, they, instead of randomizing at user level, which would create a spillover effect, they randomize on geographic units or time units or geographic time units. So you can definitely check out the articles here. I just attached a screenshot here. And then the last part is relevant to interview questions. So I think there are basically two types of questions. The first one is to just test the statistical knowledge. What are the assumptions for t-tans, how to calculate the sample size, something like that. And the second type will be give you a case and then anticipate an answer of experiment design. How would you really go through different steps to give an answer of whether to give an answer for the question PM may have. Yeah, so that's basically what I would like to talk about. The A/B test today with regards to common issues and standard procedures. That's it. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to just unmute yourself. I'm just going to check the message box. All right. If there's no questions, feel free to log off. Appreciate your time. Have a great day.
And Dao, thank you so much. It was very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you.